Excuse me.
Good afternoon, Janelle.
Hello. How are you this afternoon?
I'm doing wonderful. And you?
I'm good, thanks.
Did you lose power over last week?
I'm sorry?
Did you lose power last week at all?
I did not. I was rather surprised.
Yeah, lucky. It seems just got off the phone with my sister and mother. They just got power back late last night.
Wow.
They were kind of at wit's end. I had put a generator in last year, but it's not a whole house generator, so it kept the refrigerator and freezers going. But
That's helpful at least, though.
yeah. I mean, at least they didn't lose the food, which. Um. Why am I not showing up?
Hit start video. Sumner, you are connected to audio.
Yeah. I thought I had
There you go.
operator error.
It's Monday.
Sumner, you look deep in thought.
It still says you're connecting to audio, so we can't hear you, Sumner.
Technology is a wonderful thing. I had Comcast out here again last week, and they reran all the lines going back, I don't know how far up the pole. So I haven't checked yet, Janelle. Is the agenda out for next week?
No. We're having that discussion tomorrow to finalize that.
Mm-hmm.
And Sumner has disappeared, so I'm not sure where he's gone, but hopefully he will. Here he comes. How you doing, Sumner?
Sumner, if you want, you can just call in.
Or go out and then come back in. So good afternoon to everybody's listening. Just having some technical issues and we'll be getting going in just a minute or two. Excuse me. Sumner, can you even hear us?
Sumner, shake your head if you can hear us. I'm going to give him a call.
Okay, I think I'm gonna kick him off and then he can try again.
Yeah.
Oh, I can't do that.
Yeah, we can't hear anything you're saying either. So
I think going out and then trying to come back in.
can you try just logging out and then come back in? That sometimes, and if not, then we can just put you on, you can call in by phone. All right. Yeah, yeah. But first, if you try going out and coming back in, that a lot of times resets the connection. All right, bye. All right, let's try one more time. Okay.
Goes.
Are you on mute by chance?
It says his audio is connecting.
Yeah. That's what it did the first time, though.
Yeah.
All right, so he dropped back out.
Yeah.
So hopefully he'll call in now.
Thanks again for everybody for your patience. Tom, do you want to give him a call to see if he's trying to call in?
Yeah, I
Please.
can do that again. I'll say him. Are you trying to call in?
No, somebody's trying to call
Okay.
me.
Oh, no. You're not calling Janelle's line. It's the line on the bottom of the invite.
Or he can use the one on the agenda.
Right. You can use any of them. They all go to the same, they're just for different regions. So you can pick any one of those lines and call in. Bear with me 1 second. Mm-hmm. Yeah, should. Right. Once again, I apologize to everyone. I know we're 12 minutes into the meeting. see him coming in? Oh, here he comes.
There you go.
I'm in. I'm sorry. I don't know what the deal is.
All right. Well,
We're gonna blame Technology Monday.
Yeah.
let's move on since we've tied up a lot of people. So
Okay, so from last meeting, we were discussing height and the overall height and what potentially the height could look like and be impacted by. So staff went and Robin was kind enough to pull a number of building permits and elevation certificates. So we took a look at those. He pulled like 8 just random ones from throughout the city. A number of them are on the beach. If we're looking at 1 meter sea level rise, 6 of the 8 would actually comply. All 8, of course, comply with our current freeboard requirements, and actually they all exceeded our minimum freeboard requirement. They went from 1 foot above the freeboard requirement to 13.9 feet above the freeboard requirement, which I'm going to tell you really surprised me that they were that high. But as we were talking, they were trying to get that parking underneath the house because the lots are so small. So we're taking the 13.9 foot one out, which was a complete outlier. The average of the permits and the elevation certificates was about 4.2 feet, which is complying with the sea level rise projection of if we do 1 meter, which is a little over 3 feet.
So I didn't do an absolute count, but I will tell you there are at least 18 or more houses out on the beach, which greatly exceed the freeboard requirement because of the garages underneath them.
Right,
There's all the
again,
houses on the beach parking, Lewis Beach 1 and 2 parking lot on Savannah or Cape Henlopen. And even when you're going out along Bay and Cedar, that have all been parking underneath it. So there does seem to be that in all the rebuilding efforts, most of those houses are being built with parking lots underneath them.
Yeah, if they're building the parking underneath, they are. We had a couple that were 1 foot above, and they were providing parking underneath. It all depends on what their base elevation is and what the
Right.
elevation of the street is, which is going to impact the overall. But again, you know, most of them were coming in well over 3 feet. I mean, the average, getting rid of the outlier, that one that was literally 13.9 feet above the base flood elevation, was an average of 4 feet, which is what you are looking at for sea level rise plus freeboard. So that's going to give you an idea of what the height is going to be for those houses when they all have to start complying. Now remember, this doesn't just impact the beach area, it's also going to impact properties in town as well. So you're going to, or farther away from the ocean. So you're going to have some height differences even in some neighborhoods where some are going to be 4 feet higher than the others because some of them are going to, it's like floodplain right now. One side of the street, no floodplain, the other side of the street, floodplain. So they're already raising their houses up 18 inches.
So when Robin looked at these, how many of them do you look at the Canary Creek area and that floodplain? Because while on the beach side, I'm fairly comfortable that it's probably not that much of a hardship there, given what's already being constructed. I'm not sure on the Canary Creek drainage and the Back Bay drainage.
So some of them were a little bit closer to being, you know, like 3 feet, the area. Again, he just randomly pulled, you know, there was one on Pilot Town Road, 3.9 feet, you know, a couple of others were in the beach area that were a little bit higher. So I'm gonna most likely the ones on the beach are gonna be built higher because they're trying to get that parking underneath. Some of the other ones probably are not, they're just meeting the 18 inches, maybe a little bit above, but they're not trying to put that parking underneath.
Right, 'cause the
So, question.
lots are larger and their ability, have the ability to provide parking elsewhere.
Go Sumner.
Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
So I actually have pulled up, and there was a moment when you were probably getting some sort of a feedback, because I was able to come in as just an observer, and I'm able to hear you just fine. I don't know, there was some clearly with my panelists. I'm not sure what it is. We don't need to worry about it now. Anyway, I'm looking at the two of you on the screen. The question I would have is, and I guess it would be for Robin, is for those houses that are down on the beach, there are a number of houses that have where the parking, they may build a house high enough for the parking, but then there are plenty of other places that are being built where that may not necessarily be, at least my sense is, they aren't always trying to get a parking situation underneath the house. Those are the ones where I think we're going to need to be careful. Maybe all the properties that are rebuilding now down there are already building parking underneath. Is that the way it is?
I don't think they all are. I think some of them are. I think what this discussion came into was height and how the height was going to be impacted and what the houses were going to look like if this does get adopted. So that's what we pulled the permits for, was to get an idea, an example of what does the height look like when we start adding, 3 more feet that you have to build up above the 18 inches from your base flood elevation. And again, these range from 7 feet for base flood to 9 feet for base flood, plus then you add your 18 inches and then you figure out, where the bottom of the house is, and they were all clearing it.
So if I can interrupt you now, I
Yes.
think we want to look at both issues. One is the aesthetics of how it fits in, but the other aspect is absolutely is we want to make sure we don't get into a takings where we make the lot unusable or overly restricted because of the height. So in my mind, we have to look at, we have to make sure we have a good basis for both of them.
Well, it wouldn't be a taking because you'd still be able to build a house. So, and again, somebody built 13.9 feet above the base flood elevation and still met the height requirement.
Right.
So, maybe it's just a 1-story house. Maybe it's not the 2-story house to meet that 34 feet. But it can be done. They have been doing it. Or if you want something smaller, if you want your parking underneath, if you don't want your parking underneath, you still have to elevate the house. So it is an aesthetic issue, but it will not be a taking issue because the lots are still buildable.
Well, and I agree with you because of the ordinance that the city council just passed of
Beneficial use.
beneficial use. Thank you. Because before that, it could have been unclear as to whether limiting a house to 1 story would have been infringing upon the land use. But the beneficial use ordinance, I think, gives us a lot more coverage on that.
Right, and we're not saying it's limiting them to 1 story. It depends on many factors, if they can get 1 story or 2 story. So for redevelopment in the ordinance, it just says for redevelopment, if you fall under substantial damage or substantial improvement per our floodplain regulations, which are FEMA definitions, that you have to comply. Did you still want to stay with the 50-year sea level rise projection, which gets us out to 20? I'm always forgetting this one. Excuse me. 2070. So they'll be building out to the 2070 if it was adopted today. If they build in like 2030, then it would go out 50 years. So you guys still okay with them building out for 50 years sea level rise?
So I've been thinking about this a fair amount since we all last, really for quite a while. And the question I'd pose is, yes, I think basically I'm comfortable with this, but I think ultimately we're going to run up against bigger issues of, how viable some of these low-lying areas are going to be. The question is, do we may find there will come a time when we're going to say, well, you can build a house out to so many years in the future, but at some point beyond that, there's not going to be a point in building houses because it's going to be so difficult to get there.
So I actually have a solution for that one.
That may not be our conversation today, but
No,
I just think it's important.
So drafted as of right now, and we kind of discussed this a little bit at the last meeting, but it says flood-prone properties shall not be redeveloped, or, flood-prone properties are properties that have met the definition of substantial damage more than 2 times. So if you've met that definition of substantial damage more than twice, this would say you're not rebuilding that house. That's just up for discussion.
Yeah, and I just want to make sure we stay, doesn't FEMA say 3 times?
2
So
times.
that's how they calculate substantial damage. So let me get to.
Isn't it 2 times? I don't think they'll rebuild after the second time.
I'm bringing up the definition.
Clear with that we don't get ourselves crosswise with, or I mean, if there's a good reason and we can justify it, I'm okay with that. But otherwise, we kind of hang our hat on FEMA.
So substantial damage. Now, again, we're saying if you meet the definition twice. So you've gone through the definition, which the definition is damage of any origin sustained by a structure, whereby the cost of restoring the structure to its before damage condition would equal or exceed 50% of the market value of the structure before the damage occurred. It also includes flood-related damage sustained by a structure on 2 separate occasions during a 10-year period. So what we're saying is, more or less,
Okay.
you can hit it 4 times, because how you meet the definition of substantial damage twice. Because we're recognizing, okay, over a 10-year period, you've had substantial damage. Another 10-year period, you've had substantial damage. So 4 times you've had substantial damage. After that, you're not rebuilding that house.
Yeah,
or you.
To your point, what you just said was that you could do 40% damage, and then the second time 40%, and then that would be 1 substantial damage, and then another 40%, and then 40%, that would be 2 substantial damages, and that's when we would step in and say you can't rebuild.
Right. Or you end up, because that's one option in the substantial damage, or it's you've rebuilt twice when the house exceeded 50%. So if it's the 3rd time you're getting flooded out and it exceeds over 50% of the damage of the cost of the house, you're not rebuilding that house. This is just something I'm throwing out there. If you guys want to change that?
That's what I want to debate.
Yeah.
Yeah. So after the first time you reach the 2 sequential or 1 time greater than 50, FEMA then would not cover you for flood insurance after that. Correct?
That I don't know how FEMA works. I'm just saying FEMA has a definition of substantial damage. What FEMA ends up covering, I'm not 100%. I don't want to start speaking for FEMA.
Brett, can you chime in on this?
He said typically the insurance companies will not cover. So, and if they do, it'll be at the worst rate. And Danielle is verifying that is also, she thinks it's correct, and it has to do with the buyout, but also could be something to look at. So I'm just throwing it out there. You can make it, hey, you met this definition of substantial damage once, you're not doing it a second time, or you can meet it twice, but you're not doing it a third time.
Because recognizing that from a FEMA insurance perspective, those houses are only covered for $200,000. You know, they're not counting on that insurance. I mean, they're multi-million-dollar houses. And so the fact that the people are willing to take that risk for their own homes is one thing, but the risk it puts the city under, and BPW for that matter, on maintaining infrastructure is a totally separate. So that's why I was kind of pondering if we shouldn't tie it to when FEMA says enough is enough, that the city should say enough is enough.
Judging from what I believe Danielle was getting out of the buyouts, that's two. I think that's two substantial damages, and you're done, right? For the buyout.
Yeah, from what I'm reading in the comments, that would be a yes. So we would just be saying after two substantial damages, you're not rebuilding that house. Because, and that's just up to you if you want to make it less, more. I was just throwing something out there because we'd had the discussion about flood. What do we do with flood prone properties?
Well, I think we want to be conservative, but I also want to think we want to stay within what we have a good foundation in law and policy. And so while I would like to see us go to the two buyouts, I think we really want to make sure we have a good grounding on what FEMA says, and that we can back ourselves up that way.
But to Tom's earlier point about BPW and city liabilities, sort of city challenges, I mean, I think that's kind of where I'm coming from. At what point are some of these low-lying areas going to become prohibitively expensive for the city to support, to maintain? I don't think I don't have the answer to that, but I have to believe that in some of these areas, it's going to start to become really challenging as time goes on.
And we've talked about it a little bit, but Danielle brought up a very good point in one of the conversations I had with her, which is that some of this risk reduction needs to be in a post-disaster recovery plan. I mean, you know, we're talking about here the one-off redevelopments, but when the son of Sandy hits Lewis Beach and everything's wiped out, it's a time to start with a new blank sheet of paper as far as what we want to allow for rebuilding, if anything, at that point, or whether it's forced retreat at that point. And as I've said many times, that needs to be done now while the sun is shining and not post-storm. So
I completely agree with you. So should any of that sort of condition, any of that situation be at least hinted at here? I mean, there, you know, how do we coordinate what you're describing here, Tom, with kind of where we're headed here on a property by property rebuilding basis?
Well, my thoughts are is that this specific one that we're talking about now is sea level rise. but as Janelle has put it into the chapter under a higher level resiliency, I think it falls under there. And I think we also need to get city council to back, because what we're really, in my mind, what I'm talking about is that I think just like we have our future land use plan and the comp plan, we need a post-disaster land use plan in the comp plan, so that it carries the weight of law, but is something that is in the back pocket, that when the storm hits, just like once a property is abandoned in an area, the use reverts to the future land use plan. Once a disaster hits, something new, and whatever that is that we collectively agree, goes into effect.
And I think we,
Tom, I like the logic. I'm curious about the legality of what you just described. I could imagine landowners in these very areas that have invested millions of dollars taking real issue with a future post-recovery, whatever you just said, having a hard time saying, oh, just because you say you want to write this part of the city off, we're not ready to do that.
And that's my exact point on why we need to do it while the sun is shining, because that is exactly what happened in New Jersey, Staten Island, New Orleans, is they tried to negotiate this while everything was flooded out and people were homeless.
Danielle has just voiced better than I could exactly what I was getting at.
yes, and that is something the city will end up needing to make a determination about. That is why we have the, as proposed, is the critical infrastructures, which includes roads, and how the city is going to be looking at roads, because we had the discussion because we wanted to build the roads up to a certain level, but recognizing that some of them will actually not be able to be built to meet sea level rise, because one, there's a cost involved. Two, is that the right area to be building those roads to that standard? Especially if roads are going to be rebuilt every so many years, as we've discussed, they have a shorter lifespan than, say, the house does. So I think we've taken a look at that, and we can continue to make sure that's in there. And I know we want to look at a post-disaster plan. I think we can definitely get that. We need guidance from council to make sure they like that. I don't think, it's not typically part of the comprehensive plan. We also have a hazard mitigation plan, because we can look, and I know the mitigation team's looking at that and just seeing if there's an offshoot or a chapter that can be included into that to look at post-disaster issues. If we wanted to be a standalone plan, we can definitely look at that. But looking at that, do we want to leave that flood-prone properties shall not be redeveloped, with them meeting the substantial damage definition more than 2 times?
I think I'm good with that.
Oh, good.
I think I'm okay with it, subject to the debate of the planning commission.
Right.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Again, this will,
I mean,
planning commission, public
it's also got to be
comment.
these other parts. The mitigation, well, all the stuff that you just listed, I mean, I think if we get those other pieces in there, yeah, I'm definitely comfortable with something like what you just described. That there's other pieces that we have to have in place in order to do this right.
Yes, and I expect you guys to get a mitigation kind of overview that I gave to the mitigation team, like all those recommendations from the reports, at your next planning commission meeting. So I think that will also help kind of get you guys thinking about other things we can look at for redevelopment.
Yeah, because one of the things we talked about there was hazard mitigation, whether that's the right place to put something like this. I'm not convinced that the hazard mitigation plan is the right place to put this, because this is post-disaster land development. And while I agree with you, this is not a standard part of the comp plan. I'd be curious if we were allowed to put a map like this into the comp plan. Is it something that prohibits us from putting more in the comp plan?
Oh, no, I just think it's how do we want to use it and how do we want to, because your hazard mitigation plan could have like at the end, because we've got flooding, we've got wind, we've got, you know, all of our different hazards. So then if we want to plan to, how do we deal with those for rebuilding? Because, well, most of our issues are flooding. You know, we could have massive tornadoes just kind of take everything out, and then how do we redevelop for that? You know, because we had some nasty tornadoes last week, you know, so maybe it's just, and I'm just spinning my wheels, coming up with like different ideas of like, how can we merge a couple together? So I want to bring back to topic, and I know we discussed it last time, but you guys wanted to push it off, and I'm thinking this actually might be a good location. Is do we want to look at lot coverage for redevelopment for sea level rise? Because I know you guys want to have a much broader look at lot coverage, but I think lot coverage could really be impacted in the sea level rise area for water quality, quantity, getting floodwaters in and out. Because right now you can do 50% for the house and 65% for the lot. And if we're in the sea level rise areas, do you want to change that at all? Or do you just want to leave that for the broader discussion? Because I think it could actually fit in here for redevelopment.
So I get the idea of looking at these numbers. I personally don't have the background to be able to say that, you know, 55 rather than 65, whatever numbers you want to choose. I'm not sure what the relevancy, you know, I'm not sure I could say what the specific numbers would be. I like the logic of reducing the impervious coverage in flood prone areas. As I've said many times before, in some of these areas, having lived down by the beach for many years, ground is so saturated so much of the time, I'm not sure what difference that impervious cover is really going to make, because it's almost 100% impervious, you know, several inches under the ground anyway. So, you know, I think it would require some more careful analysis to figure out what would make sense, but I like the idea. I just don't know what those numbers would look like in order to answer your question. No.
And I think we also have, and I was discussing this about something else, is, you know, if you want your lot coverage to be a certain percentage, and we'll get into, there's a lot of recommendations coming out, and a lot of them are best management practices, BMPs, just for everybody listening, for how to improve, you know, flooding, groundwater protection, you know, stuff like that. And what we could do is, like, if you want 65% lot coverage, you're going to give us, you know, we'll give you a list of 10 BMPs. You have to do like 4 of them, you know, something like that, to like, if you want the higher impervious, you're giving us something better back. What do you think about something like that?
I'm absolutely in favor of that.
Okay, I will put something together. Otherwise, like, we can go, okay, your max, and I'm just pulling numbers out. Nobody hold me to these because there's a lot of people online. So if we said your maximum lot coverage is 50% in sea level rise areas, that's your base lot coverage. But if you want to go up to the 65, you've got to do X, Y, and Z. Something like that. You want me to try to put something together? And again, I'm pretty sure we're going to be meeting after the next planning commission meeting. So you'll have an idea of what those recommendations are and what some of those best management practices are.
So,
all right, here's where, go ahead.
I had a comment, and just so that everyone knows, I'm starting to try to pull together a workshop for the fall for sea level rise, and I've reached out to Danielle at Sea Grant, Mike Powell at DENREC, and then after I talked with them, I was going to go to Sussex County Conservation District, Sussex County Planning, and probably University of Delaware weather. This way we had some expert discussion as we move forward.
Okay,
I think I'm all behind having a workshop like you're suggesting, Tom. I may have said this at the last call, but I think there's some people up in Newark that would also be useful, particularly Dr. A.R. Siders. She seems interested in working with Sussex County and this issue of sea level rise, particularly in the area of mitigation and retreat. I think she'd be a great resource for us.
so I think this is all really good. If you wanted to start funneling that information to me, I would be happy to try and move this forward. I know right now you wanted to get this to the commission in the fall, because you originally wanted to do, we were going to do section by section, critical facilities, then get that through, then redevelopment. And I think we're almost done with redevelopment. So if we're looking to get this to the commission for their consideration and then forward on to mayor and council, I think our intent is to still move that forward quite quickly, keep that going. Because I don't want to get too sidetracked.
Remind me, are we trying to have that resiliency piece done before
No.
the fall? Okay.
No, again, I designed this to be something that could be expanded upon. So because originally when we discussed, we were just gonna like, oh, let's do critical facilities, take that to commission, get that to council. And then we were gonna spend time working on redevelopment. But those two pieces have actually come together really well. Do we wanna now finalize that, get that to commission, and then to council so we can get this hopefully adopted sooner rather than later?
Well, I'm okay with because the third piece was
New development.
Divisions, development. And we can get these two pieces so we can at least have a discussion with Planning Commission to make sure we're on the same wavelength, just like Kay did with buffers where before Planning Commission twice. So I don't think the workshop will necessarily hold that going to Planning Commission, but I don't see having the workshop interfering with our time frame by the end of the year of getting to City Council. And I think we want to make sure, with as serious as this issue is and the consequences it has, that we really get expert advice from U of D, FEMA, DENREC, and make sure we're tied in with Sussex County. This way we can go at this.
So just for Sussex County, sea level rise is not being discussed in the county.
I understand that. However, IG Burton is
he is very concerned about it. Completely understand. But I'm gonna let you know there's not
the lowest lying county in the lowest lying state of the union
dealing with sea level rise. So
I hear you, Janelle, but we can't fight this dog all by ourselves. So
well, and again, we're looking at what's going to impact us in future annexation areas. So how do we address that? So okay, we've got critical facilities. I'm going to take and put something together for lot coverage. Do we want to start discussing new development? Because I think we have redevelopment kind of taken care of. Like you're going to build, if you meet substantial damage, substantial improvement, you're building to the 50-year sea level rise. And if you're flood prone property, you're not rebuilding after you hit a certain item. And we're going to look at, lot coverage and see, do we want to do that? And if we do we want to have some caveats to go with it? And then the next section is new development.
My preference is that we have a discussion with Planning Commission on the first two sections to make sure that we are not going off in left field, and then move on to major development.
Okay. So
I agree with Tom, but what I would like to say is that part of that check-in with the Planning Commission, I think, must be a way of having a dialogue among these three committees that have been meeting. You know, because as you were talking, Janelle, about the idea of having a list of BMPs, I was thinking, well, the whole issue of fill in the floodplain falls into that mix, in my opinion. And frankly, I think there are opportunities for buffering wetlands beyond whatever minimum requirement we set. Those are all possibilities.
Yeah.
And so I think being able to have that conversation between those three committees, that I would want to have some of that happen before we roll up the sleeves on the new development, on major subdivision type stuff. So I think there are important reasons to have that all put together.
So just so everybody's aware, wetlands is going to council because the Planning Commission has recommended approval of that ordinance. So that's going to council. They will be discussing that and then hopefully setting a public hearing date. Fill in the floodplain, we've got a draft. That is to have its public meeting at next week's Planning Commission meeting. So at 6 o'clock, and again, the agenda's not been set, but it's pretty firm that will be at 6 p.m. to discuss fill in the floodplain. So you'll have a really good idea. I mean, you already know where wetlands is going. You'll have a much better idea of where fill in the floodplain is going, which is more or less net zero in the floodplain for fill. And then we have this piece. So I'm keeping track of where we are. They are all fitting really well together. They're all encouraging each other. None of them are counteracting the other, which is good. Do you guys want to get this potentially on the August agenda, or are you looking for a September agenda? Do you want me to get that like lot coverage together for the next meeting and then get that to commission, or do you want it out?
I think if that's already on the agenda for August, let's make this one for September.
Okay.
And, we'll set a public hearing for that. This way we can get input from the public, and then we can also at that point see where we are with getting a workshop together, because I really do want, before we go to city council, to make sure we have a good grounding of what our options are and the basis for what we're doing.
Yeah, I think we've spent a good chunk of time discussing options, and I mean, all of our data is coming from University of Delaware, DENREC. So our basis for our information is sound. We've had members from DENREC listening. We've got Danielle attending as well. So, you know, if they've got issues, they're letting us know. So we're staying on track. I'll get this updated, put it on the website so people can continue to make comments if they've got any. I'll work on that lot coverage. Is there something else you guys want to discuss today about these? Because I think you've discussed critical facilities. It sounds like we're close with redevelopment. Is there anything about those two items? Because it sounds like you guys don't want to get into new development right now.
So just an observation, because I couldn't make the Planning Commission, the public hearing part. I didn't know what had happened with the wetlands thing. Since we all last met, I got to thinking about the way this subcommittee has subdivided the problem between critical facilities, redevelopment, and new development. And I got to thinking that it would be nice if the wetlands ordinance worked that way as well, because I think we have restricted the buffers that will ultimately be placed on new developments because we were worried about the burden on the existing developments, the smaller lots. And I think that the same approach that we're using here might result in a better wetland buffer. It's not my place. I'm not on the wetland buffer committee. I, for one, have found it incredibly difficult to work with these Zoom meetings as someone sitting on the call. I've heard from several people independently who feel that the hearing the other day was a very hard place to try to get answers and feel like they were heard. And I think there's a reason for us to hopefully make a more comprehensive wetland buffering thing. You know, this has been an issue with me from the very beginning.
Right, and I completely
that can be out there in planning. I can raise it in the general planning commission meeting, but that's all I have for today as far as what more we would talk about.
Okay, so it should be back on the agenda for next week for a recommendation. The meeting was held, got public comment had submitted items. So you guys will still be able to make a recommendation. Should be on the next agenda. But is there anything else regarding sea level rise that we want to focus on today? Or do you want me, and I'm going to give you guys some homework too, because it looks like we're going to be starting to get into new development. So start thinking about items that you want to start looking at for what do you want to do for new development. You know, what projection, what year do we want to look at? We're using the intermediate line, but what year out do we want to look at for, you know, sea level rise? Do we want to look 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, 50 years? Again, remember, farthest out we're going right now is 2100, which is pretty much that 1 meter, which is 3.5 feet of a little over of sea level we'd be adding.
Well,
I don't know if they're all still here, but I noticed that there are 3 of the 4 city council members, at least they were on my screen a minute ago, on the call. I'm not asking for feedback from them right now, but you know, just given that we've had an election, half of the city council has changed. I'm wondering if with all the stuff that we're putting together, if it's worth, before things go forward, if we just have a check-in on whether the numbers that we've chosen, intermediate line for so many years, is still the appropriate target.
Well, and again, that's why you make a recommendation. You're going to take this, we're going to get it onto the September Planning Commission agenda. You guys are going to discuss it. Those numbers could change there. Then you'll make a recommendation to council. Council will have the final ability to change those numbers.
Well,
Okay.
more than that, that's why I propose that we do this workshop and city council will be there. I mean, we'll do it like we did the water workshops, and these things can get debated at that point before we submit to city council. And just going back to your original question, Janelle, I think new development is, in my mind, substantially different than redevelopment, where we're talking about infill and existing conditions that surround it. New development, we do not want to be putting something in the ground that in 50 years is going to be inundated. I mean, this town has been around for 300 years. So I don't know what the right number is. I don't know what the right planning guidelines are, but we really do need to look at new developments in a different light.
Yep, that's why it's a completely different section. I just wanted you guys to start thinking about it, because it seems like we're going to be done really quickly with these first 2 sections, and then we're going to be getting into the new development. Now remember, while there are a lot of older houses in the city, new houses are not meant to last 100 years. They're not constructed to last 100 years. We've had this discussion.
Janelle,
so keep that in mind when we're thinking how long and far out we want to start looking for.
I have to disagree. First of all, the average design life that the IRC uses is 100 years for a house. And that structures, the type of structures that are being built in this area, if they're not being built for 100-year structural life, that's not correct. I mean, housing stock, it may need to be revised, updated, mechanical systems, electrical systems changed, but the structure is not built to 50 years.
So we can get into that somewhere else, but I just want you to start thinking about life of newer houses. How far out do we want them to address sea level rise? Because remember, they could end up getting redeveloped as well.
So think about that. A 50-year-old house was built in 1970.
Mhm.
We have housing stock here from the 1950s in the second wave of development. I mean, you just don't expect, just because a mortgage is 30 or 40 years, doesn't mean that the house disintegrates. So,
And that's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying, you know, we've got houses that are several hundred years old. New houses are not designed to last several hundred years. They're typically you know, if you want to go with 100 or less, that's what they're being designed to be built at. So we got to think about what we want to do and what we want to start looking at them for. So I'm just get that in your head, look at that. And Danielle also said, and if the house is just to be built in an area that will not be habitable in 50 years, we're looking at. And I completely
That's where I was going earlier. That's exactly the point. And I think when we get to new developments, we need to be citing more carefully than we are. We need to be more conservative with our citing.
and
so
just so that because one of the problems with these Zoom meetings is that the comments aren't getting read out to everyone. Danielle, and answer your question, I sent you an email last week with about the workshop. I'm not sure if you received it or not, but yes, I've kind of outlined what I think each group could contribute to the workshop. And Danielle says,
some of those were just general questions for us. So it sounds like we're good with sections 1 and 2, critical facilities and redevelopment. I'm going to put something together for lot coverage. We'll get back together. When do you guys want to get back together to discuss that lot coverage and then our path forward to the commission?
So we've typically been trying for 2 weeks out.
2 weeks. So 2 weeks would be the week of the 24th. Today we had to do a Monday, but we've been doing Wednesdays. Do you guys want to go back on like the 26th? I don't know, Wednesday?
That's fine. We could do the 26th.
11 a.m.
Yeah, that's
fine. I may not be able to come in on a computer. I may be doing a telephone, but now that I know how that works, I'll do that.
Okay, so I will try to get some ideas out for that lot coverage and options so you guys have that to look at. Start racking your brains for new development, and then we'll start getting a path forward to get this to the commission. Anything else you guys want to talk about today? And Tom, you need to get me that stuff for the workshop.
Yeah, we can talk.
Thank you very much. I feel good where we are. I mean, I think there's more that we have to do, but we're in a good place right now. I think we've done what we need to do today.
Okay. Tom, you're good?
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay. Everybody have a wonderful rest of your afternoon.
Thank you, you too.
All right, bye.
Bye.